It's a hockey podcast. 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 It's a hockey
Handsome Hockey Podcast.
All right, everybody. Thank you for your patience as we did other things for a couple of weeks, including visiting family and, taking care of human stuff.
That's the life pro tip is not saying, I'm sorry I'm late. It's saying, thank you for your patience.
Yeah. Oh, I use it every day in an email for work when I just don't do something for a couple of days. We are back. We are here with episode 41. We being me, as in Jake, and across from me is
Evan.
I missed it so much. So we're going to rattle off some things that every other hockey podcast and hockey source has already talked a lot about.
But it'll be better and funnier.
Oh, that's debatable.
Maybe.
The drafts happened, the expansion draft and the amateur draft.
And the whole thing leaked beforehand. Yeah, and Seattle takes to making their picks and kind of flubs it. Actual player selections were between good occasionally to questionable to what the fuck are you doing, guys?
So questionable that my buddy and I were sitting at the bar watching it going, oh, well, that pick means they clearly have a trade with that team.
Mm-hmm.
And we said that 7 or 8 times. And
exactly.
Then there were no trades.
Which was crazy because there was some sort of a hiatus on trades. And so people thought that maybe, okay, the trade's going to drop tomorrow. The trade's going to drop later. And then it was oh no, there are just actually no trades. Except for they sold Vitek Vanacek back to Washington. So they did the thing that Vegas did instantaneously. Vegas probably made a fucking app to make trades with other teams. Whereas Seattle's sending snail mail and oh, you want this player back that we picked off of your team? Basically, they're the sloth from the DMV in that one Disney movie. We would like 2-round pick for your goalie back.
The Caps ended up coming out ahead in that situation. They traded Brendan Dillon, who they didn't want on their team anyways.
Who they wanted Seattle to pick to get rid of.
For 2 second-round picks, and then used one of those second-round picks to bring back Vitek Vanacek. So they gained a second-round pick and got cap space. Way to wheel and deal, Seattle.
Yeah, and then Seattle picks, their goalie of the future for this week, Chris Driedger, and then turns around and signs Philip Grubauer in free agency. And
a 29-year-old goalie for 6 years?
Yeah. So instead of having an insanely overpriced goalie in Carey Price that they could have picked in the expansion draft, they have 2 goalies that are paid just as much as that one guy, and not a whole lot proven between the 2 of them.
Well, no, Grubauer is a very good goalie. I think, part of that was a product of playing in Colorado, which is an excellent team. But he also, he was very good for a long time in Washington.
He is talented.
Yes. He hasn't ever gotten over the cap hump or the cup hump, but I think there's a lot of talent there. And Chris Driedger was far and away the best goalie in Florida last year, despite the late appearances of Spencer Knight. So I think their goalie situation looks really good. I think their defensive situation looks fairly solid.
They've hoarded all of the middle pairing defensemen that they could get.
Yeah, they have Mark Giordano, who is still a first pairing defenseman, but
then who else?
Yeah, nobody. And then they gave out a bunch of no trade clauses. Ron Francis was handing them out Oprah hands out hams. It was ridiculous.
He just saw what Ken Holland is doing a little bit north of him and decided he needed to get on the party.
If there is any one person you should not model your GM career after, it's Ken Holland post 2008.
Yeah,
the dude is terrible. We'll get to that, but I don't know what Seattle's doing. I don't know if Seattle knows what Seattle's doing. They still have a ton of cap space.
You know what Seattle is doing? Is throwing fish. That was a horse or fish that they beat repeatedly in the live broadcast, in which they threw a fish to JT Brown, and JT Brown made a great catch on the fish. Also, they did a fish throwing draft pick at Pike's Place Market.
I mean, overall, the best moment was probably Marshawn Lynch screwing up names. That was fun.
I liked the octopus. The octopus picked Dennis Cholowski off of the Detroit Red Wings, which was the only surprise or only piece of drama in the entire thing because it got leaked beforehand.
The only pick that I think Elliot Friedman or Frank Saravelli hadn't announced beforehand.
That part was kind of a bummer, but also highly predictable by how they set this up. I mean, if you give all this league-wide investigative reporters 10 hours to figure out who your draft pick is, like, they're gonna do it. These people have networks. They have people that talk to them. Like,
their title is NHL Insider.
Yeah, exactly.
They're gonna find it.
So that's kind of it. Seattle has a hockey team now, and we're excited to watch them start. They start with their kind of barnstorming tour of WHL barns, and then they play the Knights, which is pretty apropos, in an opener on October 23rd. So from the expansion draft, we quickly transitioned to the amateur draft this week. Like, it happened
2 days later.
2 days later, and yeah, 1-2 punch extraordinaire. The amateur draft was largely a snooze fest.
There were some good things, and there were some horrific things.
Yeah.
Let's just breeze through the good things real quick because nobody wants to hear about that.
Owen Power's hair goes number 1 overall, as predicted.
His flow is already generous and beautiful.
Never mind the fact that he's 6'6" and a very good defensive prospect.
Yeah, if he doesn't get a Suave commercial out of this, I don't know who does.
Owen Power, future Great Clips spokesperson.
Poor guy. He'll get bad haircuts for life. Michigan had 4 of the top 5 picks and 5 picks in the first round.
They had a day.
That's never happened before in any major professional sport in the United States. So that was pretty outrageous.
That's pretty sweet. And also kind of speaks to where college hockey has gotten to now. You know, it used to be a place where you would kind of go to maybe revive, but probably put your career to bed. Now it's a place where the best draft prospects are playing as they tune up for the NHL. So it's pretty cool.
Well, I mean, the way college hockey has gone, there are a lot of people who get into the NCAA at like 22, 23 after playing in like the USHL for a while or these other smaller leagues.
That was the putting your career to bed part.
Yeah, so that still happens, but because of that, the like megastars like Jack Eichel and Cole Caulfield and probably, well, maybe not Owen Power because he went to Buffalo, but like, you know, these extremely talented guys can go to college and they're playing against adults. You know, they're playing against 23, 24-year-olds, which is what they'll face in the NHL. So they're getting that kind of experience, but they also get to go to college for a year and figure that what that's like, you know, like normal people.
We always joke about this in like the NFL offseason, but it would be really interesting to put up Michigan's, maybe just like their top line against Buffalo and their top line. Like that would be.
Is Jack Eichel hurt?
Yes.
Okay. And they traded Sam Reinhart.
I'm sorry. That was a wing of a thought experiment, but I think it's kind of funny.
It's great. Let's see. What would their top line be right now? So it'd be like Victor Olofsson, Dylan Cousins, Anders Bjork.
And then on the back end, you have Dahlin
and probably Henry Jokiharju.
Yeah.
But their goalies are Aaron Dell and Craig Anderson. Michigan's goalie is like a second round draft pick.
Yeah, that's funny.
So,
and then for Michigan, that would be
Matt Berniers, Ken Johnson.
Ken Johnson, that's what I was thinking.
Thomas Bordelot, who was a second round pick last year.
Goal Bordelot.
And then the big... And then Owen Power and Luke Hughes.
Yeah, that would be at the very least an interesting game. If you make it to Beauty League and make them play roller hockey and no real checking or offsides, that would probably also help the Michigan kids.
I think Michigan wins this. I'm not gonna lie.
It would at the very least be more entertaining than like what was the team that they would always say, like, let's play the Browns against Alabama or something.
Or the Lions.
Yeah.
Alabama would have beat the Lions last year. Michigan has Mel Pearson on the bench, who is an established college hockey coach who, you know, he coached under Red Berenson for like more than a decade and then rebuilt Michigan Tech and is now the driving force behind all of these guys going to Michigan. And the Sabres have Dan Granato.
who, I mean,
It's
was sort of a celebrated college coach in his own right.
Yeah, but like, so the amateur draft happened, some fun stuff happened. Michigan would definitely beat Buffalo.
And then...
You're saying that too excitedly.
Sorry. And then Logan Mayo got drafted.
Fuck this.
Yeah, it's so dumb. He specifically asked not to be drafted. And maybe he learned a little bit about consent in this draft.
I'm so fucking upset by this.
Right. If you need to draft a PR statement prior to picking a player, you probably should not pick that player. Let's just make that a rule.
Or, as you'll see later in the episode, sign that player. This didn't need to happen. Let him go back to the OHL.
Sit for a year. He may actually improve his draft position, like it was, and prove that he's a decent human being.
Yeah, he might actually learn something. And instead of him saying, I made a mistake, he might actually say, I committed an offense that is, do you call that sexual assault? I don't know.
I mean, it's sexual misconduct.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the best way to cage it.
But so like a bunch of grown men in Montreal keep saying mistake, mistake, mistake. He fucking ruined a girl's life. Hopefully not forever, but certainly in the interim.
Right.
And has not yet apologized to the satisfaction of the victim, which is the person that you have to apologize to satisfactorily. You have to appease them. You ruined their fucking life.
Yeah.
She's still out there saying, this did not meet what I need out of this situation.
Exactly.
And she's still saying that Logan has no idea what he's done to her and the gravity of this situation. He can say, I understand the gravity of the situation all he wants, but until that victim feels like he does, he doesn't.
Yeah, his agent can put out press release after press
statements,
but that doesn't do anything to really help him. He needs to show that he's remorseful and he needs to show some culpability.
It's a bunch of old white dudes protecting a young white dude because he's pretty good at hockey. Mm-hmm. It's fucking baffling.
Which is a theme that we will find throughout this episode and probably throughout the
history
season
of hockey and the future of hockey.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of hard after seeing some really good things happen in the offseason to see Logan Mayo go kind of where he was predicted to be picked in the draft, as opposed to seeing him maybe slide and then learn a lesson or two. Afterwards, Montreal has not done themselves or this pick any service either. I mean, the 23 seconds of silence that the assistant GM put together when asked about this.
Yeah.
Because he was legitimately thinking that the reporters wouldn't fucking ask him. Like, that speaks to how coddled these front offices are with relation to the media when they don't think that the obvious questions won't get asked because they have so much power over the media through access that they expect, you're just not going to ask the tough questions. And so when they ask the tough question, he just sits there dumbfounded for 25 seconds going, oh.
Yeah. Like, if you're out in the world and you haven't seen the video yet, it's painful
and damning.
In a great way.
Yeah, damning.
Like, I'm so glad that he had that shitty experience because his shitty franchise did a shitty thing.
That's far better than Ken Holland getting Zoom bombed with people making fun of him trading for Duncan Keith. Like,
yeah, and those Zoom bombers being actual reporters. Montreal said, we wanted to take him, but our next pick was at 63, so we figured we had to take him with our first round. That means he's the player that they zoomed in on. He's the one guy out of all of the guys in this fucking draft. The one guy that they knew they had to take was the guy who had put a young woman's life in the hands of a bunch of other young boys.
Yeah, and they didn't try and get him at value, get him sliding down the board because of character concerns. No, they spent their max draft capital on this guy. And
also the fact that they were worried that he wouldn't be there at 63 says a lot of shit about the rest of the teams in the NHL. Because let's not say that this is a Montreal thing. It's clearly a Montreal thing, but it's an NHL thing because somebody else was going to draft him too.
Yeah, Montreal as a microcosm of what is wrong with the NHL and hockey culture. Speaking of what's wrong with the NHL and hockey culture, Stan Bowman, in one of his many pitiful efforts to deflect from the sexual assault and harassment scandal in Chicago, leading up to the draft, decided to say, okay, we're going to make it a centerpiece to put women in our kind of draft coverage. Fine. Like the Chicago Blackhawks do employ a lot of women. They have for years had a relatively forward-thinking kind of hiring process. But the way that they kind of paraded them out was like, look, we hire women. How could we possibly be involved in a sexual assault and harassment scandal? Because we hire all these women and we're such nice guys. You know, we're all fathers of daughters and we hire women. Did you know that we hire women? We hire women.
When Chicago is finally forced to change their name, it should just be the Chicago Barstools because it's the same fucking thing that they do with their higher echelon women in power thing. It's like they should be the Chicago Call Me Daddies. Like, fuck off with yourself, Chicago. The still somehow employed Stan Bowman is out here wheeling and dealing. And
Stand by me, Stan Bowman.
Like, let's not even forget the fact that he gave Seth Jones a massive contract days after this, which is also befuddling. This in a microcosm and I'm making a box with my hands while we're sitting here talking,
microcosm
is fucking absurd. Like all of these women on stage looking like hostages of Stan Bowman, and then he like turns it over to one of them to announce the pick, and then he just stands there like a foot and a half away from her, like staring into her head, and it's like, do what I say or you're out of a job. Like it just had this like creepy, I am holding this over you vibe the entire time.
Yeah, absolutely. Like
I was watching the draft in my bedroom because my wife had the TV in the living room and I was like, fuck it, whatever.
Also, it's the NHL draft.
It's not as exciting as one might think. And so I'm watching it and I am angrily tweeting about the Logan Mailloux draft pick when Stan fucking Bowman walks out and I'm like, I've already spent all of my rage on Logan Mailloux. What do I do? Right.
It was a 1-2 punch of just shit.
I legitimately, my wife who cares about sports 0% all the time. I walked out into the living room and sat down and she's like, why are you so pissed off? And I was like, I'm going to tell you about sports. I'm sorry. And I told her and she was like, yeah, that fucking pisses me off. And I was like, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, sports, for providing us with much consternation that we can share with the women in our lives.
As if I didn't have enough consternation from the world already. The sport I love the most shivved me again. Like twice.
Yeah.
It's enough to make me yell on my podcast.
So while we're yelling, we're just not going to stop yelling. We're just going to run through all of the things that pissed us off about the past couple of weeks in the NHL offseason, because sadly, there was a lot.
We're going to pivot to racism here for a second, though.
Mm-hmm.
We'll get off that sexual assault train for just a minute. Don't worry, we're coming back to it. So 2 weeks ago, if you had asked a majority of NHL fans, especially like quote unquote woke NHL fans, who their favorite team was outside of the team that they root for, a good chunk of them would have said the Carolina Hurricanes.
Oh, absolutely. You know, they've had a fun social media experience for the past couple of years, and they do a lot of community engagement. Ron Brindabor's a really likable coach. You know, yeah, they have spent a lot of media capital building themselves into this sort of paragon team.
They were the bunch of lovable jerks.
Yeah, right.
They play football on the ice. Hey, yeah, that's fun. Storm Surge, yay. Well, now their Storm Surge is a storm front.
Yeah, they signed Tony D.
Speaking of people who have gotten way too many fucking chances, Tony DeAngelo still has an NHL career.
And part of the reality is that Tony DeAngelo on the ice can be a pretty good player. And
on one end of the ice, it's just not the end of the ice that he's paid to be good at.
Yeah, if you shelter him, he's shown he's a pretty decent offensive defenseman. And unfortunately, that makes him a hot commodity in the NHL, and the fact that he is persona non grata makes him cheap. And what do NHL GMs love more than cheap offensive defensemen?
Nothing, actually. They also like vastly overpriced offensive defensemen as well, Erik Karlsson. This signing makes virtually no sense. And we all knew somebody was going to make this signing.
Sure. We all know that Tony DeAngelo was going to land somewhere, but we're not really prepared for it to be on a formerly kind of progressive team, and a good team at that. Someone consciously saying, Tony DeAngelo helps us be a better team on the ice. next year after he fought his fucking goalie and after giving up an awful goal.
His goalie punched him in the face for being a dick.
Right.
And then the team was so done with him that the New York Rangers, another NHL team or franchise, went, fuck this guy. He's never playing for us again. That's incredible. And then days into free agency, they were like, hey, what about the racist guy that's kind of good at hockey? Do we care about racism? No. How many chances has he had? 4 or 5 at this point? Well, those are all mistakes, though. So, and it's a mistake that he's been a rampant racist his entire adult life.
But if you listen to his media availability, he says he's just a competitor. He's just such a competitor that occasionally the racism comes out.
Yeah. You know what doesn't happen when I get super competitive? I don't drop N-bombs.
Yeah. I can attest to that. And you drop people, but not N-bombs.
Yeah. And I remember being in my 20s and being all pent with rage. Don't let the current dialogue in this podcast fool you. This is calm, Jake. Like, competitiveness is not an excuse for being a racist schmuck.
No.
Like, competitiveness is not an excuse for being a shitty human being. You know who else was super competitive? Michael Jordan. You know what he didn't do? Fucking walk around being a racist douchebag. Competitiveness as an excuse for racism doesn't make sense. And the fact that the Carolina Hurricanes were just like, yeah, we cool here. No, good one, Tony. Like, let me give you that little chicken wing in the ribs. Good one.
At the very, very least, as you pointed out to me in our text thread, Greg Wyshynski hit him with a great question and made him kind of disavow the January 6th insurrection that he maybe has some sympathies for. Otherwise,
he might have been there. I don't fucking know. Like,
he wasn't there, but his burner Twitter was.
Yeah. Oh, his burner Twitter came back real quick after after he got signed. It was.
Oh, like, yeah? Is it back up?
Oh, yeah. It popped up real quick. It was like the first comment on the Canes announcement that he had signed. Yeah.
NY Rangers fan 8675439.
Yeah, something like that. This is fucking bananas.
Also, on top of the offseason that Carolina has been having, it's just like, what are you guys doing? They're kind of rudderless. They let a good goalie prospect in Alex Nedeljkovic walk for virtually nothing.
A 3rd round pick.
Right. And then paid handsomely to completely retool their goalie couch with kind of a used up Frederick Anderson and
oft injured Ranta. Like,
right. 2 talented guys, but neither one of them tends to finish seasons.
They better sign a 3rd goalie. I hope to God they have a 3rd goalie. They did this. They traded Jake Bean to Columbus for a 2nd round pick for fucking nothing. Apparently they just
one of their better defensive prospects.
Yeah. Apparently they're like, nah, we're good. Like, we don't need young offensive defensemen. Oh, I know. We'll sign Tony DeAngelo. We have a younger, non-racist forward or offensive defenseman, or we can get an older, racist locker room cancer defenseman. Whatever shall we do?
I wonder if there's a betting line in Vegas on like Tony D incidents per 60 or something like that. Like, if he finishes the season, I don't know. I would be willing to place money on him landing exactly where the Rangers had him last year.
Yeah. I almost guarantee he finishes the season in Carolina, though.
On best behavior.
He'll be on his best behavior. This is his chance to get another contract. He'll sign that contract somewhere, maybe with Carolina, but they're super cheap, so maybe elsewhere.
As long as he does not embarrass the GM and coach there, he'll be fine for contracts.
Well,
I mean, like...
Well, Sean McIndoe talked about this on Puck Soup a couple of weeks ago, where like Logan Mailloux has to like say the things he's saying because he can't embarrass an NHL GM if he wants another chance.
Exactly.
But like Tony DeAngelo is a walking, talking, racist, N-bomb dropping example that shit doesn't matter. He completely embarrassed Jeff Gorton in New York. Completely embarrassed him. And they got lucky that his mega contract they could easily void for almost no money. So they got lucky there. But like, he embarrassed an entire NHL franchise and they were like, oh, no, that's cool. Carolina was like, this is fine. I guess we'll transition back to sexual assault now.
We could only stay away from sexual assault on this podcast for so long, unfortunately.
Because the NHL just keeps serving it up. So Jake Virtanen, he of one civil suit, I believe, against him in Vancouver.
Maybe more allegations behind the scenes, but one...
there are reportedly several other women who have had this experience with Jake Virtanen. One civil suit. His agency put out a statement saying that this was all about money and all about slandering Jake's good name. And it's like, first off, do you know what a civil suit is?
Yeah.
It's about money, you fuck.
And the police are investigating, but they're operating pretty slowly and kind of ham-handedly because, I mean, the accuser didn't originally mean for this to get out into the public, and she was sort of outed in social media circles. And so, like, that a criminal investigation has taken some time to get underway doesn't mean a whole lot, but it's being ostensibly used by Jake Virtanen's management to say that, oh, this is a weak case, which is not really accurate.
Jake's a good boy. Give him a contract. No, your time in the NHL should be fucking done. Like,
hopefully.
Well, but as we've learned, I just keep making shrugging faces at Evan, like just like I'm painful shrugged.
Well,
Like,
the difference here is Jake Virtanen was also struggling on the ice before his sexual proclivities came to light, and so he may have a different outcome. Than
he's not potentially as good as Tony DeAngelo,
which
or
is
Logan Mailloux.
It sucks ass that is, you know, a metric that matters in these things, but unfortunately
it's the metric,
right?
It's like the only metric that NHL GMs care about. Like we want to think of our teams that we root for as like these paragons, but really all they care about is saving their jobs. And they know that this shit'll blow over.
Right.
So,
or
like,
be someone else's problem if they get fired and
yeah,
have, you know, they're sitting and drinking in Cabo Wabo and watching the next GM have to deal with their mistakes.
Yeah. And I'm just waiting for a GM to be like, well, the previous GM signed this dude. He was an idiot and we're upset about it. And so we're doing everything we can to get rid of him.
I'm surprised we don't hear GMs throw the other guy under the bus as like more than we do.
Like you would think like Ken Holland would have said something about Chiarelli, but like Ken Holland's doing just as bad. So like,
if not worse,
like, but like the GM who comes in after Ken Holland should just be like, yeah, I didn't sign Darnell Nurse to this 8-year, $9.25 million contract, despite the fact that he's probably like a $5 to $6 million defenseman. I didn't sign him to that. So, sorry. Like, that's Ken's fault. You talk to Ken.
Yeah, I'm always surprised that we don't get more of those comments. But
so yeah, Jake Virtanen, like this is a scumfuck play by his agency to try and get his. And I understand why they're doing it. They are his agent. They don't get paid unless Jake gets paid. So they want to get their client back on an NHL team or playing hockey somewhere.
It's also a bad look. I mean, I think it probably hurt him more than it helped him.
It's fucking atrocious.
Because the statement is just transparently...
It's victim blaming.
Yeah.
It's like... It shows a complete disregard for the facts of the case and also for how the Canadian legal system works.
Right. It completely misinterprets legal issues around the case for... PR points with people that don't understand the law.
Yeah, and granted, Evan and I don't understand the law, but guess what? Twitter does. And so, you know, we've got Sam from the Broadscast.
I was going to say, she's basically my Canadian legal analyst at this point.
Yeah, I might just hire her if we ever get into legal trouble. So they have been on Twitter kind of just like rehashing these facts with the usual parade of idiots who goes on Twitter to defend any man accused of anything slanderous. Because apparently that's a thing that guys feel the need to do now.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, like we have to protect every man from themselves.
For one guy that gets accused of anything, there's 100 guys on Twitter going innocent until proven guilty, right? Yeah. And it's like, no, that's not. Like, that's one legal standard in criminal cases, and there are several other legal standards like preponderance of evidence and clear and convincing evidence.
And also, like, you can believe a survivor's case. Like you can like listen to them and be like, I believe you, I'm here for you, and still let legal due process happen.
It's one thing to be critical of the facts of the case, and it's another thing to kind of ignore the facts of the case and just say, this person's out for money. Yeah.
Yeah. So, dudes on Twitter, y'all suck.
But same as it ever was.
It's kind of amazing the amount of times that our Twitter feed has somebody mentioning Hellsite or Hellscape of Twitter, and yet we're all still there.
It's kind of addicting, I think. That's part of the reason.
We love scrolling.
Doom scrolling.
Scrolling. What?
I think the Germans have a word for it. It's called doom scrolling. So, in Chicago, things have predictably gotten worse again with respect to their sexual assault and harassment scandal. There have been some slightly positive developments, if one could say that, in that the Blackhawks have publicly asserted that they'll make the results of their legal investigation by Jenner and Block public, which will probably allow more people to testify, which is, I think, in the end, a good thing. A couple of players have been continuing to give statements in the media and kind of eviscerating the team. Brent Sopel amongst them has, continued, and Nick Boynton have both continued to say, everyone on the team knew this was an open secret. We dealt with it and kind of shoved it under a rug just so we could all play together. So several key people in this lawsuit have still said they're not going to testify because they don't believe it will be a completely independent investigation, which is understandable.
Including John Doe 1 and John Doe 2.
Right. Apparently, Joel Quenneville will testify or be deposed, and several other people will get more involved than they were, and hopefully that will help bring more truth out of the situation. Some details that have come out from John Doe 1's lawyers as we, kind of go through this weird public pre-discovery. Like, we don't know that we're going to get to discovery yet in this case because of the Blackhawks' motions to dismiss. So John Doe 1 has been putting out details in the media, like the insane story that he was threatened with a baseball bat while trying to leave Brad Aldrich's apartment and leave a situation in which he was being sexually harassed. And maybe the saddest angle that has come to light recently is that John Doe 1 was being taunted and slurred at practice by many teammates because this was such an open secret and so many players knew. That's maybe the most depressing thing to hear come out recently, because it reinforces that not only was the team aiding and abetting a sexual harasser, but like the players were putting it on the victim. And that's completely unacceptable.
Every time something new comes out about this, it gets worse. And we can only say so many times that all of these people should be fired. And there just needs to be massive sweeping changes within that organization. Unfortunately, only a few players have come forward and said that they knew about this. And we've had Duncan Keith shy away from comments and kind of sweep it under the rug. We've had Jonathan Taves say he didn't learn about it until afterwards.
Although, what would you expect the captain to say? I mean, he was always going to carry water for the franchise because that's what he does, and that's the kind of player I think he is.
But we can expect more.
We can, but I don't know. I think maybe it was cynical of me, but I never expected him to say anything besides something that was kind of pre-programmed.
Right. I mean, and that's, I get that, but like at the same time, like we should, like as a people, we should expect more and want more from, people like Jonathan Taves, who are the captain of the team, to come out and say, you know what, you're right. I should have spoke up about this then. I'm speaking up about it now.
I guess that just speaks to how low my expectations were. But it was still disappointing.
The bar in all of this has been set entirely low. And I can't wait to see what a bombshell this internal report that's totally removed from the Blackhawks, even though they're paying for it, it comes out and says it'll probably be a whole bunch of nothing. And then we'll just, we'll start this cycle of Jake yelling into a microphone over again. It's an embarrassing, like, just putrid thing for the NHL.
Right. And to me, reading the tea leaves, seeing that the Blackhawks intend to make it public, I'm like, okay,
that means there's nothing damaging.
That means that it is going to be probably a rote exercise in self-excusion.
The thing about this is the NHL could have already ended this. The NHL could have opened up an actual investigation, like they did with our next topic, Evander Kane, they could have opened an investigation, done it themselves, and said, okay, this is what we found. And this could have been over. This could have been dealt with already. Instead, it's going to drag into the season. Like, Chicago has done a decent job-ish of like building a team that might be competitive this year. But like every time they win a game, it's going to be like, oh, but guess what? They harbored a sexual assault or a sexual predator. Like they could have already gotten in front of this, done the right thing, and moved on.
Right. If the NHL had stepped in and helped make this an actual independent investigation, we would get then depositions from everybody, including the victims, and then they could publish an independent report.
Or the fucking Chicago Blackhawks could have said, yeah, you know what? We screwed up. We're going to try and make this as right as we can now. We cannot fix what happened in the past, but we can take steps now to make it better now, and done the right thing. And also said, we're also going to put these standards in place so that hopefully this never happens again in our organization, and become like a leader and taking a step towards fixing what is, what we've seen over the last decade is a massive problem in sports. This like sexual predation by people in power. Like, they could have like chosen to be a beacon moving forward. Instead, they're just like, they're abstaining from all guilt or responsibility and just moving forward and parading women as if that makes them better.
Correct.
It's a fucking mockery. So Evander Kane.
Yeah, he's been accused by his estranged wife of betting on NHL games, including betting on the San Jose Sharks to lose, which most weeks is a pretty good bet.
Yeah, he doesn't even have to try.
The betting things in the accusations were maybe the less important than the other stuff we heard in the accusations.
Yeah, let's just knock out the betting accusations real fast. We're not saying anything that has been said about Evander Kane or anything that Evander Kane has said about his estranged ex-wife is true. We're letting that play out.
They're calling each other names and saying each other is mentally incapable, and it's ugly.
Yes. So if Evander Kane did bet on hockey games that he played in, it doesn't seem likely that he did, because he also had one of his best seasons last year.
Correct.
He had a very strong season. He was actually one of the few people on the Sharks who had a strong season.
Correct.
And I personally am somebody who like thinks Pete Rose should be in the Baseball Hall of Fame. So like, and I'm not saying Evander Kane is a Hall of Fame player, but like I don't.
Right, betting on
your team to lose when they suck, like, and you personally go out and have one of the best seasons you've ever had, like, even if he did, like, I'm not upset about that. Like,
no.
Is the NHL upset about that? Sure. Does it like destroy the integrity of the game? Sure. Is it written into his union contract that says he can't bet on hockey? Yes. Should he be dismissed or whatever for it? Sure. Let the league handle that. That's fine.
But the swiftness that they've come out with the investigation, as opposed to this Blackhawks situation, which is way worse, way more damaging for the team, the league, the victims, is just stupefying.
Well, and their investigation is about whether or not he bet on games, where the more damning things that have, or accusations that have come out of this, are that he's absolutely neglectful to his children and his wife. His wife states that she had to sell her wedding ring and her engagement ring in order to buy formula for their young daughter. And meanwhile, he's jet setting around the world, betting on shit and partying in casinos. And then like they're at home in a home that has been foreclosed on and is going to get sold out from under them and will have nowhere to live. Like, if this is true, that's far worse.
Right.
And that shows a massive level of neglect, if true, on Evander Kane's part. That's something that that's the thing that should be investigated.
Right.
Like, from both like a legal and a league standpoint, people should be fucking looking into this.
Yeah. And I mean, the reports about Evander Kane being kind of a degenerate gambler have been out there. He's been in bankruptcy because of his gambling issues. So some of this is believable, but the most believable and damning parts are that he's functionally abandoning his family. Yeah, I wish that we could, as a league, focus more on that and penalize that. But unfortunately, they're not going to be, the moral police that we wish they could be at times.
Reports have surfaced that many of the players, I think the phrase several players on the Sharks don't want Evander Kane back next year. And
shocking.
Well, good luck with that. Yeah. He's actually one of the more defensible contracts that the Sharks have.
Yeah, I was going to say $7 million for his production is not insane.
No, it's a fairly solid contract, and he's 30, so he'll be 34 at the end of that deal. That's a perfect time to get out from a $7 million a year contract.
He'll be 30 poor at the end of that deal.
He's already poor. He's already poor. The NHL, as per usual, has not shown itself very well in this or any other of these circumstances. All right, let's stop talking about bad stuff. Mm-hmm. Some fun stuff happened. Some great stuff happened.
Free agency happened, which it's been the gift that keeps on giving if you're a middling defenseman.
If you are a fan of a team that didn't do stupid shit over the free agency period.
I don't know what that's like.
I do. Finally, after years of it not being my team.
I guess I'm still a Blackhawks fan, but
yeah, you're wavering towards Kraken fandom very quickly. Since we've already talked about defensemen, we'll just kind of get this one out of the way. Mm-hmm. There were 4 contracts for defensemen signed that were north of $9 million. Darnell Nurse, Seth Jones, and Zach Werenski all signed huge deals. Also, Dougie Hamilton, but he's actually worth $9 million a year.
Yeah, and his was a free agent deal, not a renegotiation.
Right. Well, I mean, Seth Jones technically was too.
Well, right, but Werenski was a re-sign and Darnell Nurse was a re-sign. And then also Cal McCarr.
Oh, that's right. We had 5. Cal McCarr deserves all the money that he can possibly make.
Cal McCarr, $9 million a year. Absolutely what is a correct signing.
Also, maybe a little bit of a steal, to be perfectly honest. He should be one of the best paid defensemen in the league.
And then Seth Jones saw that and said, hey, Stan, if you want to deflect from your shitty situation, you're going to have to pay up, buddy.
Make it shittier.
And so they paid him
$9.5 million for the next 8 years for a defenseman who had 1 really bad and 2 arguably bad seasons right in a row.
Yeah, a former kind of future Norris guy who's kind of been in the gutter the past couple of seasons. In order to make that contract not horrible, he's going to have to be in the Norris conversation
every year for the next 8 years,
which is not going to happen. I'm just going to put that out there.
It might not ever happen.
No.
Darnell Nurse making Norris level defenseman money is
worse. It's stupid. It's stupider.
Darnell Nurse had a much better year than Seth Jones did last year.
But
he's not a $9.25 million defenseman.
No, he's not very defensively solid, and he got a lot of good bounces from playing with Connor McJesus and Leon Draisaitl and that upper echelon power play unit.
They signed Tyson Barrie to a much more palatable contract, and he gives you roughly what Darnell Nurse does. So
yeah, that's also and they absorbed
Duncan Keith's contract.
Yeah. They have so much money wrapped up in subpar defensemen.
Long live the reign of Ken Holland in Edmonton.
It has been one of our favorite horses to beat.
Ken Holland did. I will get the Zach Hyman deal. I think is a pretty solid deal. It's long, but you've got Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl in their primes.
You got to win now.
And
if you don't, he's not going to be there anyways. So
I think the deal for Hyman, he's already going to be the best winger that Connor McDavid has ever played for, except for when Leon Draisaitl was playing on his wing. So it's a solid deal. Dougie Hamilton going to New Jersey is, I think, the most interesting of these.
And then following up with New Jersey signing Tomas Tatar.
Which was an excellent signing. He's his 5v5 numbers are off the charts. He's one of the top 20 players 5v5 in the league the last 4 or 5 years. Disappears in the playoffs, but as was noted on Puck Soup yesterday, they don't really have to worry about the playoffs. So I really like what New Jersey's building there, I think
Their Hughes per 60 are really through the roof.
it's a super young team, but in like 3 years, this New Jersey team could be very good.
And I think that's what they're banking on. And they're banking on Dougie Hamilton kind of being a piece of their future core that they build around. It seems like a very good matchup there. And they're, you know, they're a quick team. They're a fast team, transition team. And I think that matches up really well with his kind of defensive.
They have a defenseman who can get the puck out of the defensive zone either by himself or with a great pass. Like, and he's very solid defensively. He's an excellent power play quarterback. He's one of the best offensive defensemen in the league. He will probably be a Norris vote getter this year. It's a great signing.
Just on the other side of the tunnel, though, the Rangers have been pissing away what was a very good team just because they got beat up by Tom Wilson. They traded Pavel Buchnevich, one of their best goal scorers.
One of the most underrated players in the NHL.
Absolutely. To the St. Louis Blues for veritable peanut shells. You know, and then the Blues followed up by signing Brandon Saad.
To a very solid contract.
Yeah, a very solid player, very solid contract. They let Mike Hoffman walk after kind of a disappointing season, and
they lost Vince Dunn in the expansion draft, which is like, you know, arguably okay.
Part of the problem, though, is they are still old and contract heavy enough that they kind of have to move Tarasenko to make all of this work yet.
But it sounds like that's just something they should do anyways.
Right. He wants out, but the problem is they just can't get much value for him, but they need his contract off the books. So it's going to be interesting to see where Tarasenko goes, because maybe it's a bit of a cash dump cheap deal for someone that can take him. And like that becomes a more interesting reclamation project now.
You know, if they absorb part of that contract, that's only for 2 more years. So like if you say we'll take $2.5 million of that $7.5 million, like somebody's getting a possibly reinvigorated Vladimir Tarasenko for $5 million a year. Like,
yeah, it's worth a swing of the bat.
He also has a no trade clause though. So
right. He can
go wherever he wants.
Speaking of weird salary dump trades for barely any return, Marc-Andre Fleury was traded variably in the middle of the night, finding out via his agent, finding out on Twitter, to the Chicago Blackhawks for a nobody defenseman. And he pouted about it for a good 24 to 48 hours. He was like, maybe I'll retire. I don't want to play in Chicago. But then apparently, you know, probably Taves and Kane like sent him some emails and I don't know. They must have gone full court press to get him to play with them.
They're old enough to where email was still a viable form of communication. So yeah, that makes sense.
Right. Kirby Doc maybe sent him a TikTok, you know, and he didn't get it. He couldn't like figure out how to download the app.
Of like dancing and like changing outfits.
Hugging his brother that got drafted by the Blackhawks, which is funny. That was actually kind of a cute video. Colton Doc getting drafted and then Kirby like video bombing and hugging him. And
it was right up there with Jack Hughes's response to Luke Hughes going to New Jersey. Jack Hughes just starts vibrating with joy.
Yeah, that's maybe the weird undercurrent in this offseason too, is like brothers being reunited.
Yeah, Cal McCarr's brother got drafted by the Avalanche.
Right. Caleb Jones got traded by the Blackhawks before Seth Jones got signed. So the Blackhawks have 2 sets of brothers in their organization. New Jersey has 2, or New Jersey has 1. Colorado has 1. I'm sure there's probably more brothers, but you know, it's just kind of cute and funny.
Canada has both of the Kachucks.
Yeah, it's true.
It's been one of the craziest free agency periods that I can possibly remember. Also kind of dropped in Puck Soup earlier this week. Merced Njemi, who is about to be the Seattle Kraken writer for the Seattle Times, but has, you know, made their name as they were a Boston correspondent for a long time, but also do a lot of writing for the NWHL.
Also big Dunkin' Donuts aficionado.
As is everybody from Boston, yes. They dropped in this week's episode of Puck Soup that the big conversation points for the next expansion for the NWHL are Chicago, Pittsburgh, and Detroit. Detroit
after Montreal.
Yes, after Montreal. Detroit being the team that has the area that has the most advanced communications with the league. So, Connecticut Whale, I love you. And I always will. But if Detroit gets an NWHL team, I might be jumping ship. Awesome to see possible NWHL expansion coming up in the next couple of years. We also have seen some PWHPA members going back to the NWHL, which has been interesting to see. First off, I don't want to pretend that I know anything about I understand the differences between the two factions, but like I don't want to say I understand the like animosity between the two really.
Well, part of it has to do with the fact that we're coming into a Olympic season for women's hockey.
Yes.
So some NWHL teams are nervous about temporarily losing players to the Olympic effort, and like players that are on other nations' rosters,
like Lovisa Sealander in Sweden.
Exactly. And then also the PWHPA like gets more competitive, and that they do kind of a thing, and not everyone survives that process, and so you're seeing some more players go between the two. And I think that's interesting and probably healthy for the women's side of the sport long term.
Ultimately, we're not rooting for either entity to survive. We love rooting for women's hockey to survive and to thrive. And so I think, we don't have a dog in this fight or a horse in this race. We're just hoping for women's hockey to continue thriving. And
personally, I'm stoked to see Marissa come to Seattle and cover the Kraken. I think she's a really good writer. I think she's got really good takes on stuff, and loved the Puck Soup episode she was on. So really looking forward to her being closer in our media sphere.
So we haven't recorded in about 2 weeks, and as I was editing our last episode, Luke Prokop came out as gay, as a gay hockey player. He is widely regarded as the first male hockey player on a professional contract to come out.
He's a defensive prospect for the Nashville Predators.
Yes, he played, I believe, with the Calgary Hitmen last year.
Okay.
And signed a professional deal with Nashville. So we know we're late to the party here, but it's an absolutely amazing party to be at. This is such a thrill for people who want to see a more progressive climate in the NHL, and the response to Luke was overwhelmingly positive. Even on Twitter, like stories about it, like people being like, this is great, this is awesome, and then the occasional like, nobody cares, play hockey, and it's like, yeah, fuck that guy. But like,
I was a little, I guess, pleased by the lack of saturation of the I don't care,
stick to sports.
And it was pretty cool. I didn't know this until more recently. The NHL donated $100,000 to a foundation in his name to kind of support gay players of the future.
And so, we've seen people like Brock McGillis who have kind of come out as a gay man who played hockey and talked very candidly about how it really hurt his career and his life and his like self-image to be closeted for so long because of, this kind of like fear of coming out in a traditionally conservative and masculine environment. And for Luke to feel comfortable in doing that and to be celebrated by the hockey community for doing so is really awesome to see. That is number one. Like, this is awesome. Well, no, number one is that Luke felt comfortable and he can now live his life how he chooses and how he identifies.
Yeah. And moving into this fall, we have an out NFL player and an out NHL prospect for the first time ever. I hope that this is one stepping stone towards fully inclusive leagues where people don't really give a shit if they have gay teammates or not. And if they have the fans, before we don't really care about people's sexual orientation in sports.
It would be awesome if Pride Tape didn't have to be a thing.
Right.
Like, if raising awareness for, the LGBTQIA plus community in hockey was done just because we knew these players were. There's no way that Luke is the only gay player in professional hockey. It's statistically impossible for him to be the only gay player in professional hockey.
Correct.
And creating an avenue for more people to come out and be comfortable, living their life and living their truth is for Luke to take that step is massive. And, hopefully the response to Luke coming out compels other people once they are comfortable to come out. And
yeah, the response has been heartwarming, and the courage of Luke Prokop to take this step, just like Carl Nassib did, kudos to them. That had to be such a scary, heart-wrenching decision to make, and to identify yourself publicly like that. Just the amazing courage of these people to take this step for everyone else. I'm really happy that they were, for the most part, accepted with open arms. Like it's been good.
It's sad that it takes pioneers to take that step, but I'm super thrilled that we have some now. And hopefully this can just kind of build and become a more positive, inclusive, and welcoming environment across sports in general. But
and hopefully like Luke sticks around. Hopefully he has a really full career, because I think that would just solidify his place as a pioneer. I mean, maybe he doesn't have the longest hockey career. Maybe this becomes kind of what he's known for. And in that case, that's fine too. But we're hoping that, he can become a force and play in Nashville or wherever for as long as he can, just to show that this league can be a welcoming place for the gay community. Another kind of heartwarming story that we saw in relation to tragedy that we heard earlier in the year, Pierre-Luc Dubois has signaled that he's going to change his jersey number to number 80 on the Winnipeg Jets in honor of Mattis Kivlenieks, who died this summer and from accounts may have saved some people's lives in how he, was killed with a firework accident.
Elvis Merzlikins and his pregnant wife were reportedly saved by Mattis's actions that day. And Pierre-Luc Dubois doing this, it's a small gesture, but it's a huge gesture. It's like, let's continue to honor this guy who very obviously was near and dear to everybody in the Columbus Blue Jackets community. Hopefully, his death ends up not being in vain.
Yeah, and it's a good way to honor him. Nice small step. Who isn't beloved by the Columbus Blue Jackets community?
I have a guess.
John Tortorella.
I was going to go with Seth Jones, but yeah.
There's a lot of rats fleeing that sinking ship, but a lot of draft picks coming back in. So, we'll see what GM Jarmo can do.
That dude has been working people this
year.
He
has been working people. But John Tortorella signed on with ESPN to be a commentator. And so now we're going to look for John Buchagras and Greg Wyshynski to be, blocking more shots and going hard in the corners.
Do you remember the last time John Tortorella was on TV?
Was it when he was trying to fight people in the Vancouver locker room?
No, it was just like boring.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know who's going to be more boring white man hockey coach between him and Mike Babcock.
Babcock for sure.
Yeah,
that dude has no personality.
But Babcock is easier to make fun of because you can do the Babcock voice.
Well,
and I can't do a angry Torts voice.
Give it some time.
Yeah, I'm just gonna give it a YouTube video, and in my head he's kind of like maybe like a John McEnroe. Like, you cannot be serious. But other interesting minutiae around the league that I kind of wanted to talk about. Half-brothers Quentin Grimes and Tyler Myers become the first sibling duo to play simultaneously in the NBA and NHL. Tyler Myers being in the NBA.
Tyler Myers should be in the NBA. That dude is tall. He's too slow for the NBA, actually.
He gets stuck in those 3-second court things all the time.
3-second violation. Actually, Tyler Myers might not be tall enough for the NBA at this point.
Isn't he 6'7"?
Yeah, 6'6", something like that.
He could be a guard.
Yeah, he's like a small forward.
But that just speaks to, what ridiculous family they must have in terms of sports. Like that's got to be cool to have.
And also, if you dream of being in the NBA, be tall. Because ain't no Muggsy Bogues or Spud Webb showing up in the NBA anymore. Like, you got to be like 6'4". You know who else is incredibly competitive?
Who?
Nathan McKinnon.
Yeah, he made some news this week.
Well, he didn't make some news.
Well,
Nikita Zadorov made some news.
He made the news this week via Nikita Zadorov giving comments in a Russian interview about how, McKinnon is kind of Jordan-esque. Like, we know this. But Nikita Zadorov's details were very, very interesting. He is, like every other high-level athlete, he's got like a live-in nutritionist. He pays a lot of money to eat really well, takes care of his body, doesn't drink, drinks all this water. But then it kind of goes into the Captain Serious psycho realm when you realize that he imposes some of these things on other players.
And by other players, we mean everybody who plays for Colorado.
In that he got like unhealthy snacks and ice cream and stuff like removed from the Avalanche's nutritional options.
Can you imagine getting busted by him like eating like chicken skin? Like him just coming in and just like wailing on you with tears in his eyes.
Imagining like a ice cream truck rolling up to, what is it, Ball Arena that they play in now, and him like
flipping it over like He-Man.
Yeah, or I was thinking like making like The Rock and standing tall and just like whacking its tail lights with a 4x4 and saying like, you need to get that fixed.
Or like the cops and Porky's.
I don't know. It's been dunked on in the media this week, and it's been really kind of funny and wholesome because, this is cute. Like it's funny. When a guy does the research and takes away all the white sauce from the team.
These little quirks of athletes are always kind of fun. To see that Nathan McKinnon takes it perhaps a little too far is so much so as to not make the sport enjoyable for people. Mm-hmm. Like, it's humorous. And as those of us who play hockey and abide by none of these rules, that sucks.
This has been a fun, cute story to follow, and like also makes you just wait for the Colorado Avalanche this year that much more, because he is dialed after that painful playoff exit.
Tampa Bay is number one until they're proven otherwise, but Colorado is not that far behind. So the NHL is going to be wild this year. I can't wait for it. It's going to be so much fun.
Yeah. I mean, we've got this compressed off season, and then now we're going to get 85 games of crazy.
Yeah.
After only getting 56 games of crazy last year.
With the Olympics in the middle.
Oh yeah. If we go to those.
Yeah. All right, everybody. I think that does it for us today. Thank you for your patience, as we said earlier, as we, just got some stuff out of the way so we could come back to you full steam for episode 41.
It's the off season for us too.
Yeah. We're going to show up whether you like it or not, but it might not be when you expect. Thanks always for listening. You can find us all over the internets. Our website is handsomehockey.com. You can find us on Instagram at Handsome Hockey Podcast, at Handsome Hockey on Twitter, or handsomehockeypod@gmail.com if you would like to message us in ways that millennials understand, but Gen Z does not. You can also find us on the Handsome Hockey Facebook page.
And obviously you're listening to us somewhere, but we're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Overcast, Red Circle, and YouTube.
We will get this episode out to you as soon as possible. Thank you so much for listening, and stay handsome, everybody.
Restez beau tout le monde.